Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Wolfula, with a review of Guillermo Del Toro's latest film, his long-dreamt-of adaptation of Mary Shelley's classic novel Frankenstein, which is one of the most adapted and influential stories of all time, but if anyone can stitch together and jolt some life into this classic tale for a modern audience, it's gonna be Del Toro, who's been trying to make a Frankenstein flick for 20-odd years now.
No! No!
Fortunately and unfortunately, Frankenstein is part of Del Toro's Netflix deal, so it was given a limited theatrical release to make it eligible for awards and build up some hype. And I wasn't able to catch Frankenstein in theaters before it got put up on Netflix, where the film will likely be trapped forever, unless it gets a Criterion release like Del Toro's stop-motion Pinocchio made for Netflix. Frankenstein probably will get a Criterion release. Those are expensive, though. Oh well, Netflix as a platform sucks, but Del Toro's Frankenstein on Netflix is really good. It's much more faithful to the original novel than the average adaptation of Frankenstein, especially the classic Karloff Frankenstein films, which were iconic in their own right and became the general public's perception of the Frankenstein story, but the Karloff films weren't the best representation of Shelley's original writing.
Good.
Del Toro's film is actually heavily inspired by one of Frank Darabont's screenplay drafts for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Kenneth Branagh's attempt at a faithful adaptation to act as a spiritual successor to Coppola's Dracula. But that flick was hampered by poor casting and creative choices. De Niro doesn't even look like a monster in his movie. He just looks like a guy with some bad scars. Plus, De Niro gets brought back to life with electric eels. What in the fuck? Del Toro's film remains faithful to the original novel's basic plot while taking some creative liberties with the story to make for a more entertaining film and ultimately make this new film Del Toro's own vision of the story, while remaining true to the spirit of Shelley's tale. This Frankenstein film leans on genuine horror, much less than typical for adaptations of the story, and it's honestly less of a horror story than the original book. Del Toro's take on the material focuses on being a tragedy and less on being a tale of terror, where an ungodly creation carries out bloody vengeance against its maker. The Del Toro film still has plenty of scenes of action and violence involving the monster. It's just not as much the dramatic focal point of the film compared to other versions of the story. Del Toro's Frankenstein initially follows the structure of the original Shelley tale, beginning with a ship headed on a doomed expedition to the North Pole, trapped in ice, and this ship's crew finds itself in the middle of a brutal conflict between Dr. Victor Frankenstein, played by Oscar Isaac, and his damned creation, played by Jacob Elordi.
Bring him to me!
And after the crew narrowly wards off Victor's abomination, this allows the Doc to share through flashbacks his skewed version of the events that led up to his deadly pursuit of the creature.
Some of what I will tell you is fact. Some is not. But it is all true.
Victor's father, played by Charles Dance, who actually played Frankenstein's dad in another movie. Well, Pa Frankenstein was the best doctor of his era, but he neglected and abused Victor as a boy.
You bear my name, Victor, and with it my reputation.
And ultimately, Father Frankenstein failed to save Victor's Mia Goth mom as she birthed Victor's little brother William, and the Baron later showers his youngest with affection that was withheld from the mama's boy Victor, which leads to further resentment from the Baron's eldest son.
Leah had died, did you not?
I did everything in my power to save her, you must know that.
In spite of this, and even after his father's death, Victor still follows in his old man's footsteps in the field of medicine, becoming an accomplished surgeon, but only in the hopes of being able to undo death, a mission given to him in a dream by a crazy red CGI angel, which is pretty much Del Toro squeezing in a cool Del Toro-y visual while we wait for the monster to finally be revealed. But there are plenty of cool Del Toro-y visuals in between, one of the highlights being Victor arrogantly demonstrating his work reanimating the dead to a tribunal.
Stop death! Not slow it down, but stop it entirely!
Which is simultaneously a great showcase of the film's effects budget through Victor's barely held together corpse brought back from death to catch apples.
That is not trickery, that is a decision!
But it's also a great showcase of Oscar Isaac's performance as the film's title character. Isaac brings an unusual charisma to the character of Frankenstein that adds to an already compelling character, and like any good portrayer of the Doc, Isaac manages to make his version of the character captivating and even likable to a degree despite being an egotistical dickhead.
Release now, please. please always helps.
In a twist to the story, Victor is commissioned by a weapons contractor played by Christoph Waltz to bring the dead back to life,
Researchers for truth and transcendence, kindred spirits.
seemingly to aid in the ongoing Crimean War effort by bringing dead soldiers back to life, or even building an undead army. And this merchant of war is willing to give Victor unlimited resources to carry out this goal.
I will endow your pursuit with unlimited resources.
A departure from the novel and most other adaptations where Victor works in secret either solo or with a single assistant. This Victor has his brother and a whole staff helping, at least with the early stages.
It simply will not do. Start over.
In another twist, instead of Victor being engaged to his cousin or adopted sister Elizabeth,
This is Elizabeth. You must think of her as your own sister.
Victor's brother William's bride-to-be is Elizabeth, who is instead the niece of Christoph Waltz' weapons contractor character.
Are my ideas not clear?
You certainly expressed them loudly enough.
And Elizabeth happens to be played, just like Victor's mother, by Mia Goth in a dual role. So there are still some incest vibes involved with Elizabeth when Victor seemingly becomes instantly attracted to Elizabeth.
Absolutely delighted.
And Victor only wants to cuck his brother more when Elizabeth proves to be a challenge to Victor and his work.
And you think me a fool?
Run to your brandy and cigars. The boys are waiting.
Elizabeth's role in this film is a subversion of how she's typically handled in adaptations. Usually in retellings, Frankenstein is too distracted by his work to give his fiancée any attention.
Oh, can't you see I mustn't be disturbed? My experiment is almost completed.
But Elizabeth in this film instead distracts Victor from his work,
And for the very first time, I became more interested in life.
sowing seeds of doubt in his mind about his work. Victor realizes that his fixation on death has prevented him from living life.
There is a bond between us. Can you feel it? An almost physical one. I truly believe it to be something else.
Victor's brother William lives the happy life Victor wishes he had, with a chick who looks just like their hot mom, no less. So yeah, maybe if Victor Frankenstein just got laid every now and then, he wouldn't be bringing the dead back to life.
A romance drenched in Mediterranean sun and silk and the skirmishes of love.
Insulting. But unsurprising.
Speaking of which, Victor does just that, and despite being more faithful than usual to the original novel, the process of bringing the monster back to life is still firmly inspired by the James Whale films. Lightning strikes a tower, and the electrical current feeds into a monster pieced together from corpses. A familiar process, but this time rendered with Del Toro's visual flair. Mary Shelley in the original novel was very vague about the process involved with Frankenstein bringing his creature to life. It seems like in the book, Victor renders corpses into raw material, somehow building his monster from scratch, and what animates the creature is just called the spark of life in the book, with no further elaboration. Black magic could have been involved. Victor is an unreliable narrator, so in the book, he would very likely not want to fully elaborate upon what was involved with his crimes against nature.
Hey, Hollander! A storm is coming!
Del Toro goes all in with the cliche bringing his monster to life, but it looks really cool, and it's what most people would expect to be how Frankenstein brings a corpse to life. It's the most dramatic way to handle the most pivotal scene in this story. Victor's and the monster's relationship are also a big departure from the book. When Victor sees the monster alive for the first time in the book, Victor shits his pants and runs away in fear, and while Victor is off being a pussy, the monster just leaves and heads out into the woods. Not super interesting for a movie, so the monster and Victor are given much more of a relationship early on, with Frankenstein attempting to educate his monster.
Alas, no further language or development occurred.
But Victor is frustrated by the creature only being able to say one word, Victor's own name.
Can you say boots?
Victor's frustration at his monster's seeming lack of intelligence basically mirrors Victor's relationship with his own father, with Victor giving his monster the same treatment Victor received from Baron Frankenstein, continuing a vicious cycle of abuse. But I don't blame Victor. It's fun to abuse your undead creations. I mean, that's what they're there for.
I didn't do this. You did this.
The creature is given much more superhuman strength in Del Toro's version, along with a healing factor.
It's closed. How?
Elements that do make this movie feel a lot more comic booky, like this Frankenstein monster can easily have a crossover with Hellboy, but these elements are necessary to the story and aren't just cool Del Toro flourishes. Jacob Elordi's monster initially looks a hell of a lot like a stitched-together version of the handsome Squidward engineers from Prometheus, which I guess is additionally funny, seeing as the novel Frankenstein's alternative title is the modern Prometheus, with Prometheus being the Greek myth that partially inspired Frankenstein and is frequently referenced in the new movie.
Can you contain your fire, Prometheus? Or are you going to burn your hands before delivering it?
But later in the film, when the monster gets some clothes and grows his hair out, he looks a bit more like Brad Dourif in Lord of the Rings. This is a more tragic and romantic version of the monster that's closer to the original story, though, drawing influence from earlier artwork of the creature, along with later artwork by the late great comic artist Bernie Wrightson. So the creature is less on the horrific side in the film, and more on the sympathetic side, with Elordi playing a gentler, more frightened and sensitive version of the monster, playing off the idea of the monster starting out with the mind of a child, innocent, but Elordi is still fully capable of intensity as the film plays out. The final big twist to this Frankenstein film's narrative is a seeming unfulfilled love story between Elizabeth and the monster, but don't worry, this isn't another monster-fucking movie like Shape of Water or Nosferatu, which, you know, might disappoint some of you freaks, but Elizabeth's and the monster's relationship in this film is kept innocent.
Elise? For me? Thank you.
The two are more like soulmates, but their relationship might not even be romantic, with Elizabeth more fulfilling a deprived maternal role for the monster.
Elizabeth.
With Elizabeth echoing the mother that Victor lost. Elizabeth's new dynamic in this film story is interesting, but the movie doesn't take much time exploring this potential love quadrangle between Elizabeth, her fiancé William, Victor, and the monster. It's a unique concept, but Elizabeth only has a few brief scenes with the monster and disappears for most of the film, and her fiancé William is barely elaborated on. He's just a boring, steady character with his life together.
Victor's always been one to harvest attention. Even as children, I mitigate his voice by staying silent.
It seemed like Del Toro initially wanted to explore his version of Frankenstein more from the angle of family and romance, but either the romantic elements felt too familiar to past films, including his own, or Del Toro felt he needed to ultimately follow Shelley's main plot, with Del Toro only allowing himself to add his own ideas in the spaces between Shelley's plot points, when it really did feel like, to me, the middle and final acts of Del Toro's film were going to go into a radically different direction from the original story, which is a bit of a shame because we'll always have another adaptation of Frankenstein that can be faithful to the book. This film seemed like an opportunity for Del Toro to do his own total reimagination of the story, but Del Toro was obviously conflicted about how to handle the adaptation for his dream project, and he ultimately made a fine compromise, telling the original story with a few Del Toro twists to spice things up. Frankenstein is a 2.5-hour movie, but with Del Toro's original plan of wanting to tell the story over 2 whole films, it feels like a lot of ideas ended up being cut out or rushed along and underexplored. Victor, for instance, accidentally kills Christoph Waltz's investor Heinrich, who was already dying of syphilis and wanted his brain placed in the monster's body.
And as we give life to our new Adam, I want to be placed in this new perfect body.
With Frankenstein claiming the monster actually killed Heinrich, but nothing further comes of this.
In a fit of rage, you killed him.
Waltz is great in the movie, but his character feels kinda unnecessary with how the story plays out. The last hour of the film does shift into the monster telling his side of the story, which is much more honest than Victor's half of the tale.
My maker told his tale, then I will tell you mine.
And the monster story is the most faithful aspect of this new film to Mary Shelley's novel, with the monster hiding away in a family's barn, learning to talk by listening to their conversations and trying to curry their favor through unseen gestures of kindness, which culminate in the monster bonding with the aging blind patriarch of the family, who teaches the monster to read classic literature.
I've read about men that fought dragons and men who lost everything.
Even if you aren't familiar with the Frankenstein story in its original form, the monster story plays out pretty predictably just because it's influenced so many other tales since Shelley's writing, but Del Toro in his adaptation still breathes beauty and poetry into the monster's narrative, taking a different approach to the creature's journey compared to Shelley.
I understood that I was nothing, a wretch.
Shelley's monster starts out as an innocent, corrupted with evil thoughts of revenge based on how he's treated by the world, while Lordy's monster only resorts to violence out of defense or against his creator to try to force the doc to make a mate for the monster.
The miracle is not that I should speak, but that you would ever listen!
Everything comes down to this film's thesis that the true monster of Frankenstein is, well, Frankenstein. Mankind was the monster all along is pretty cliched, and it doesn't help that the new movie has a character explicitly state this.
You are the monster.
But there is truth to it. Frankenstein brings the monster into a cruel world for seemingly no purpose beyond proving that it can be done. It's like a father only having a son to continue a name. Life is pointless if there's no love.
What recourse do you have but to live?
Guillermo Del Toro's Frankenstein is a beautiful adaptation of one of the most important and influential pieces of horror literature. It's a great matchup between material and a creator that has been long coming, and I'm glad it's finally been realized, with grand visuals and great performances. It just also feels like Del Toro had so much more he wanted to do with his adaptation. There are so many new ideas with this film that feel underexplored, but like a ship captain on a deadly journey in the Arctic, it feels like Del Toro ultimately reined his ambitions in, making a solid adaptation of the original Shelley book with a few tweaks to the story's neck bolts to make it more Del Toro's own without veering off course. And while this journey feels familiar, Del Toro's film manages to still feel like a significant entry in a long lineage of Frankenstein films, with Guillermo Del Toro expertly reminding why this story is still so important and remembered 200 plus years later. I give Frankenstein a Mia Goth out of Mia Goth. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to my sponsor, me. Pledge to my Patreon today to support the channel and help it continue to grow, and you'll also get access to weekly movie nights every Sunday and archive commentaries if you miss the movie nights live. Just $5 a month to get a movie night every week. Here are the movies I'll be streaming next Sunday. Pledge to patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula if you're interested in my bonus streams, and I thank you in advance. This video is made possible through the pledges of my Patreon supporters, and I'd like to give a very special thanks to the kind folks pledged to my shoutouts tier. All of their support on Patreon means a lot to me, and it helps my dark influence continue to grow. If you liked this video, like it, and if you loved it, click the subscribe and bell buttons for more videos. Be sure to also keep in touch by following me on social media at Dr. Wolfula. While I still have your attention, consider pledging to my Patreon to support the channel and get bonus content like private movie night streams with me and credits in my videos. Consider pledging at patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula. Also, check out official Dr. Wolfula merch on tpublic.com/user/Dr. Wolfula. Thanks for watching. Dr. Wolfula signing out.